Imagine waking up every morning knowing there's a 50% chance you won't make it home alive. Imagine being paid to let deadly creatures attach themselves to your body, or handling materials so toxic that your bones literally disintegrate. These are not horror movie plots. These were real jobs that real people did every single day. Knocker-uppers. Before alarm clocks were affordable, someone had to wake you up for work. That someone was called a knocker-upper. From the 1800s all the way into the 1950s, knocker-uppers walked the streets before dawn with long bamboo poles or pea shooters, tapping on bedroom windows to wake people up. Now, this might not sound deadly, but think about it. These people worked every single night, in freezing British winters, in the dark, with 0 days off. Sleep deprivation became a serious health hazard. And here is the funny part. Who woke up the knocker-upper? Some of them used alarm clocks, others just never slept properly. This profession vanished when alarm clocks became cheap enough for factory workers to afford. Leech collectors. In the 1800s, doctors believed that draining blood could cure almost anything. And to do that, they needed leeches. These people waded into swamps and ponds, using their own legs as bait. They used to stand there for hours while hundreds of leeches attached themselves and started feeding. A single collector could gather over 100 leeches in one session. But the job came with serious risks. Blood loss, infections, and waterborne diseases were common. Some collectors even contracted fatal illnesses from the very waters they worked in. The worst part? The pay was terrible. Leeches were valuable to doctors, but the collectors themselves were treated as expendable. This profession died out when medical science finally moved past bloodletting in the late 1800s. Rat catchers. During the 1800s, London was infested with millions of rats. They spread disease, destroyed food supplies, and terrified the population. Rat catchers were hired to solve this problem. Armed with nothing but their bare hands, a stick, and a sack, they would venture into London's sewers and basements to catch rats alive. Why alive? Because some catchers sold them to pubs for a brutal sport called rat baiting, where dogs would kill as many rats as possible while crowds placed bets. But the dangers were severe. Rat bite fever, leptospirosis, and even the plague. Every single bite could be a death sentence. And these catchers were bitten constantly. One famous rat catcher, Jack Black, was appointed Queen Victoria's official rat catcher. He wore a uniform and caught rats for the royal household. Even with royal backing, it was still one of the deadliest jobs in London. The profession faded when rat poison became widely available and modern pest control was established. Resurrectionist or body snatchers. In the 1700s and 1800s, medical schools desperately needed human bodies for anatomy lessons. But the law only allowed them to use bodies of executed criminals. There were not nearly enough, so a black market emerged. Resurrectionists, also known as body snatchers, dug up fresh graves at night and sold the corpses to medical schools for huge sums of money. This was not just creepy, it was incredibly dangerous. If caught, they would face execution. Families started guarding graves with weapons. Some even set up booby traps. And then there were William Burke and William Hare. These two took things even further. Instead of digging up bodies, they murdered people and sold the fresh corpses to medical schools in Edinburgh. 16 victims before they were caught. The job also exposed workers to deadly diseases from decomposing bodies. Tuberculosis, typhoid fever, and more. This horrific profession ended in 1832 when the Anatomy Act was passed, allowing medical schools to legally use donated and unclaimed bodies. Powder monkeys. Powder monkeys were children. Boys as young as 8 years old who worked on naval warships during the Age of Sail. Their job? Carry gunpowder from the ship's magazine to the cannons during battle. Why children? Because they were small and fast. They could squeeze through tight spaces and move quickly under fire. But that speed came at a devastating cost. These boys worked in active war zones. Cannonballs, musket fire, explosions, and flying debris. If the gunpowder they carried was hit by a spark, they'd be vaporized instantly. The mortality rate was horrifying. Many powder monkeys didn't survive their first battle. Those who did often suffered lifelong injuries, burns, and trauma. They were not volunteers, either. Many were orphans or children from poor families, essentially forced into service. This practice ended as naval technology advanced and child labor laws were established. But it remains one of the darkest chapters in naval history. Radium girls. In the 1920s, radium was seen as a miracle substance. It glowed in the dark, and companies used it to paint watch dials so they'd be visible at night. Factories hired young women to do this delicate work. The painters were told the radium paint was completely safe. In fact, their managers told them to lick their brushes to create a fine point for precision, over and over, hundreds of times per day. But radium is lethally radioactive. Within a few years, the women started getting sick. Their teeth fell out. Their jaws crumbled and had to be removed. Their bones became so brittle they'd snap from the slightest pressure. Some women's entire skeletons disintegrated while they were still alive. The companies knew. Internal documents later revealed that management knew radium was dangerous, but hid the evidence to keep profits high. The Radium Girls fought back. They sued their employers in a landmark case that changed labor law forever. Their lawsuit established the right of workers to sue for damages from occupational diseases. Most of them died young in agony, but their sacrifice led to the workplace safety regulations we have today. Radium dial painting ended completely in the 1960s when safer luminous materials were developed. Human canaries in coal mines. You have probably heard the phrase canary in a coal mine. Miners used to bring caged canaries underground because the birds were sensitive to toxic gases like carbon monoxide and methane. If the canary died, miners knew to evacuate immediately. But somebody had to carry those canaries. Somebody had to watch them die, day after day, knowing they were breathing the same poisoned air. These workers were exposed to the same deadly gases, just in slightly lower concentrations. Carbon monoxide, methane, coal dust. It destroyed their lungs. Black lung disease was almost guaranteed. Many canary handlers didn't live past their 40s. And here's the cruelest part. They knew the risks. They watched the warning system die in front of them every single shift. They knew exactly what was happening to their own bodies. The psychological toll was immense. Watching small birds suffocate in your hands while you struggle to breathe yourself. Knowing your death is just slower. This practice finally ended in 1986 when electronic gas detectors became standard in mines. Technology replaced both the canaries and the people who had to watch them die. Which of these jobs do you think was the worst? Let me know in the comments.